Good evening. This is your host, Karen Hudes, and I'm bringing you the fifth segment in the network of global corporate control. We have just put the first four segments on YouTube, and I've gotten a lot of questions, which I'm going to try to answer during this segment. This is a series we're going to continue for another 8 segments. And the reason that we decided to do this broadcast is because we think that it's important for the people not only in the United States, but also in the other countries that belong to the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund to know that these organizations were created in order to decide what to do with the world's gold that was put into sequestration. That's a fancy word for hiding at the end of World War II. And the idea was after 50 years, this gold would come out for the benefit of all of humanity. And those 50 years ended, and now it's up to us to do what we think is best for everyone. And the people who are supposed to decide this is the Board of Governors of the World Bank and International Monetary Fund. That's the Ministers of Finance and Development. And the organization is governed by that group. There is another group that thinks that it has the right to decide what to do with the world's wealth. That is the network of global corporate control. That group has also been in hiding, and they were trying to stay in hiding. The way they did that was they bought up all of the media, and they have been censoring the media. But fortunately, we have the internet, and we have public access TV. And in one of the earlier episodes, I mentioned that one of the ways to find out who was winning was to see what people thought of the mainstream media. And one of the slides that I was going to show you this evening, we've run into a little bit of technical difficulties, and that's not surprising. We run into technical difficulties all the time, and when I say we, I don't mean DCTV. I mean the group that has been working together to defeat the network of global corporate control. What is that group? It is the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. It's also the Group of 77. That's 133 developing countries. It's Germany, and it's the United States minus the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is a private bank, and all of the central banks, 60 of them, belong to something called the Bank for International Settlements. That group is at the very heart of the network of global corporate control. And that group has captured the governments in something called state capture. That means that they have printed money. They haven't given any consideration for printing that money. They charge interest on the money. They expect the taxpayers will pay that interest. It's a scam. And they pay the politicians. And what the network of global corporate control has done since 1861 is they have had martial law in the United States, and they have used the legal profession to hide their tracks. And one of the things that the legal profession has done is they have taken away the courts that are guaranteed under the United States Constitution. When people sign their bank signature cards, there is a secret contract where they waive their right to those constitutional courts. And the judges are actually administrative judges, although they don't bother to tell the people that come in front of their courts that they're not real federal judges. One of the things that I did was I went to the Judiciary Committee in the Senate, and I asked them to acknowledge that those courts were actually not the courts that we're supposed to be getting. And the Senate Judiciary Committee couldn't be bothered to acknowledge this fact. That's because the U.S. Congress has been working under a second secret constitution that was put into effect in 1871. And the District of Columbia has been governed by this corporation behind the scenes without the legal profession bothering to tell anybody that this happened. But fortunately, a lot of people have been working on this problem, and they've been disclosing it. And we have documentation. For example, there was a study group in the 1990s in South Carolina, and this study group went back and looked at the State House records. And I'm very happy to make that study available to anyone that sends me an email. My email address is going to be on the screen for you to see. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have for proof of any of the statements that I'm making. Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk about was a special man who's been helping me named Ixir Puz. He's been doing wonderful graphics. One of the graphics that I wanted to show you talks about the fact that there is 170,000 metric tons of gold on offer to the United States from the Global Debt Facility, which is one of the names for the trust fund that was set up at the end of World War II that contains all of the world's monetary gold reserves. And similar amounts are also on offer to all of the member countries of the World Bank and the IMF. 3 of the countries have responded, but we're not able to make this gold available until we have done certain things. One of the things we have to do is we have to inventory all of the assets. This global debt facility contains gemstones, it contains art treasures, and it contains bonds that were issued in return for gold. Those bonds were issued in the 1930s. They're called Treaty of Versailles bonds, and they carry interest which has been compounding. So the network of global corporate control actually owes us more than we owe them. The amount that they owe is in excess of $2 quadrillion. That's $1,000 trillion. And these amounts are staggering, but they are what that network owes us. And so what we did was we used a process that actually Benjamin Franklin had set up called the notarial protest. And we asked the Federal Reserve whether they actually had the gold that they're claiming in their statements, whether the Treasury Department had that gold, or whether that gold was actually in the global debt facility. Because that's exactly where the gold is, and that gold was accessed by John F. Kennedy. He signed the Green-Hilton Agreement 8 days before he was assassinated. And one of the graphics that Ixir Puz had done was talking about the fact that there is a gold certificate on deposit in the Bank of Hawaii, which is something that can be exchanged for the actual gold, which will be done as soon as I'm able to get back inside the World Bank and IMF, because the ministers of Finance and Development reinstated me, and unfortunately I haven't been able to get back in, and that's because of corruption in the District of Columbia. Commander Maurice arrested me illegally when I was in the World Bank, and one of the other groups that's been corrupt is Allied Barton, which are the security guards. That group is owned by the network of global corporate control, and they're illegally preventing me from going back to my desk so that I can do the paperwork to deliver the world's gold to the world's people. And in the previous 4 segments, we were talking about some of the things that I say things, it's actually shenanigans that the network of global corporate control has been pulling to try to prevent people from getting their gold that belongs to them. And after we aired the segments, I think it was actually the last segment where I discussed what the International Court of Justice did. The lawyer who prepared the papers for the Global Debt Facility was Ferdinand Marcos. And what the International Court of Justice did was they issued a memorandum saying all of the documents that Ferdinand Marcos had prepared were rescinded. And I responded to that by saying that in the first place, the International Court of Justice had no jurisdiction over the matter, because when an agreement called the Bilateral Mines Field Breakthrough Successor Agreement, when that agreement was signed, it said explicitly that the courts had no jurisdiction. And the other reason why the International Court of Justice had no jurisdiction is because after 50 years, any claimant has lost their claim under a concept called the Statute of Limitations. Now, who was the claimant in the case that the International Court of Justice was reporting on? It's a group called the Committee of 300. So I wrote some letters to that committee saying that they had no right to the world's gold, that under the terms of the Bilateral Mines Field Breakthrough Successor Agreement, it's the Bretton Woods organizations, that's the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, that those organizations are the ones that are going to decide, not the International Court of Justice. And I signed that letter on behalf of all the ministers of finance and development, and of course I copied them. And one of the things that I did just recently was I sent copies of all of this correspondence to the ministers of finance and development, and I said, if there's any inaccurate statement, would you please correct it? Otherwise, that documentation stands for the world. And that's exactly where we are. And so when we have these broadcasts, you can find out what's actually going on as opposed to what the media owned by the network of global corporate control is telling you. Because the media is actually just giving you propaganda. And I had mentioned in one of the earlier segments that a good way to find out how much progress we're making is to see how seriously people are taking the news that they're given under the mainstream media. And one of the cartoons that I wanted to show you tonight was a statement that's actually in the mainstream media where people are very bored at the non-news that they're receiving. They would like to hear what's really going on. They know that it's really just a charade that they're being told. Now, there was a second graphic that I wanted to show you, and we'll correct this problem. As I said, it's not unusual to have technical problems. Just yesterday evening on a Skype call, the Skype program had been mysteriously erased from the computer of the person who I was supposed to call. That's one of the things that the network of global corporate control likes to do. When I tweet documents, many times the links are broken. So what I do is I simply go back and highlight the fact that there was a document that the network of global corporate control didn't want people to see. So I'm very grateful that you're watching this broadcast, and we'll see if we can rectify some of this censorship, because it's very important that people know what's actually going on. So the second document that Ixir Poos had beautifully drafted was a statement showing that we have been under martial law since 1861. And one of the consequences of being under martial law is that our rights under the Constitution are suspended. And one of the other consequences is that the things that we think we have, the property that we think we own, it turns out that under this state of emergency, we're considered to be belligerents. Our government is considered to be at war with us, and they've taken away our property rights, So when you get title to your house, it's not actual title. What you're getting is a warranty from the state saying that there is title. Who's actually holding the title to your house that you have paid off, or your car that you have paid off? It's the network of global corporate control. But we've given them a taste of their own medicine, because what we did was we filed a financing statement in all of the Federal Reserve banks, and that said that the Federal Reserve banks are actually indebted to us, to the global debt facility. And these statements stand. Now, two of the secretaries of state tried to rescind these financing statements unsuccessfully. One of them, the Secretary of State of Illinois, couldn't read his statute, and he thought he had the right to rescind the notice because he didn't understand that the World Bank is a regulated bank, and under the terms of his statute, he's not allowed to do that. Now, there was a third graphic that I wanted to show you, and this is a very serious matter. Iksir had heart surgery, and he's recovering now, and our thoughts are with him. When you see the graphic, you see how important the heart is. And we have to think about the heart, because when we take over our gold and when the rule of law is there, we are going to have to decide what is going to happen to the people who have been working for the network of global corporate control. We're going to have to decide what to do with the Committee of 300. And for that, it's very important for us to have a heart. And one of the reasons also is because we want a peaceful transition. And so I'm asking everyone to think very seriously whether they want to be in a peaceful world or whether they want to be in a world of conflict and war. And there's no guarantees. One of the things that people are asking me is, when is it that we're going to actually be able to have our gold because it belongs to us? And the point of the matter is, I went yesterday to the meeting of the Board of Ethics and Government Accountability. I had tried to go the previous month, and the agenda was not followed, and I wasn't given the chance to talk about the corruption in the District of Columbia. But yesterday I did go, and I did make my point. And before I had gone to the board, I sent an email to Mr. Spagnoletti, who's the chair of the board, and I had copied all of the embassies in New York and in Tokyo, and I had also copied the lawyers, the American Bar Association International Law Section, and I had also copied the General Counsel of the DC Council. And what I had asked them to do was to say whether they had any objections, and they didn't have any objections. And so that means that there should be no corruption in the District of Columbia, and Melvin Gresham should not arrest me when I go inside the World Bank. And that's what I intend to do at the conclusion of this broadcast. Not immediately, of course, not in the evening, but I will be there, and we will see whether the District of Columbia police are going to be corrupt or whether they're going to do their job and represent the people in the District of Columbia who do not want to lose their largest employer. I wanted to read some of the language in the letter to Mr. Spagnoletti. After my complaint of April 2 that Commander Michael Reese had illegally used the DC police force to prevent me from representing the monetary gold reserves of the U.S. and other nations at the World Bank's headquarters, the Board of Ethics and Government Accountability permitted the successor commander of DC's 2nd Precinct, Melvin Gresham, to do the same exact illegal, corrupt thing. DC Council's General Counsel Dave Svenyak lost his job the week I tweeted his involvement in this corruption. I had also showed how the International Court of Justice had retracted its attempt to steal the assets contained in the global debt facility and made it clear that there was to be no further prevarication or unauthorized interference by the network of global corporate control arising from the corruption in the District of Columbia. I also wanted to read you the letter that I sent to Dr. Yellen, the chair of the Board of Governors. Dear Dr. Yellen, the amount of gold that the Fed is claiming that it holds in Fort Knox, in the Fed's vaults in New York and elsewhere, is fraudulent. As I have informed Bishar Abdurrahman Hussain, Director General of the Universal Postal Union International Bureau, and H.E. Patrick Donahue, Postmaster General of the United States, there will be a peaceful transition to national currencies minted from the gold in the global debt facility and to local currencies as introduced by villages and municipalities. And let me say that this local currency is very important. That creates full employment. Getting back to my letter, moreover, the obligations of the Federal Reserve under the Treaty of Versailles, together with accrued interest thereon, are going to be offset against country indebtedness. Now, we've got just 4 minutes before the end of this broadcast, and so I wanted also to talk a little bit about Article 5 of the United States Constitution, which provides that when 2/3 of both houses deem it necessary, they are to propose amendments to, there can be a convention to propose amendments. And 2/3 of the states have actually requested amendments, and the Congress has refused to convene the convention. And the reason why we absolutely need to have a convention is because we are under a second secret constitution. And this is not something that should continue. It should be very apparent that we need to be protected under our Bill of Rights, which we're not protected at all. And people don't know this. So now I would hope that the people who are worried whether the convention would be run away will take to heart the fact that it's just to propose amendments, this convention, and there has to be ratification by 3/4 of the states after the amendments have been agreed at the convention. So this is going to be a very interesting time. We're going to find out whether the Coalition for the Rule of Law actually does exist. I want to thank you for listening to another segment of the Network of Global Corporate Control. Next week's segment will feature whether you have title to your property that you think you do. And it's been an interesting evening, I have to say, that we've had these technical glitches. It's something that you have to work with because we are actually all in this together. Sometimes people wonder whether it's actually possible, these things that I'm saying, and I'm very happy to provide you proof of all of these things. But the other thing that you need to do is you need to get together with people in your neighborhood, with your relatives, and you need to sift through the things that you're being told and the things that you think are true. And you need to learn critical thinking, because as we move forward with our gold, because all of us are going to be given real, true currency, we're going to have to try to figure out how we could have had all of this corruption and we're going to have to work together to make the world the way we want it. And it's not going to be something that's coming from above. It's not going to be something that's dictated to you by the World Bank. So until next week, I'm your host, Karen Hudes. Thank you for listening. Good evening. This is Karen Hudes. I'm your host for the Network of Global Corporate Control. We're bringing this to you live from the DCTV studios here, and it is June 23rd. I'm calling this session Taking Stock. We have now had 8 programs in this series, and we've had the chance to get feedback from our audience. And it's been good feedback. There's been a lot of questions because we have raised some very serious issues, including the fact that there was an attempt to nuke South Carolina on the 7th of October 2013, and we showed proof. We have now put 4 of the programs up on YouTube, and we will be putting another 4 programs up following this broadcast. The next programs that we're going to bring you are going to be featuring the legal and accounting professions and also journalism. We're going to be calling that Liar, Liar, Pants on Fire. And after that, we're going to have a session on what can I do? What are individuals, what is the role of individuals in what we're calling the global currency reset? The reason that I'm your host is because I was working in the World Bank legal department for 21 years, and I found out after I was fired illegally that the World Bank and International Monetary Fund have a very special role. They're sitting on the world's monetary gold reserves. And this is a very important thing because the central banks, they're private banks, and they don't own the gold. We do. And the important thing about the Bretton Woods institutions, they were set up after World War II with a very special role. The gold was put into sequestration for 50 years. That means that nobody could touch it. And after those 50 years, anybody that claimed that they had a legal right, that legal right was extinguished under a concept called the Statute of Limitations. So now it's up to the entire world to decide what to do with our gold. And fortunately, the 188 ministers of finance on the board of governors of the World Bank and IMF have already decided what to do with the world's monetary gold reserves. We're preventing World War III. We're going to take those gold reserves and we're going to replace the paper currencies that they're a scam. They always fail. Paper currencies always fail. And the idea that these bankers had was to bring the United States down by a crash of the Federal Reserve Note. The Federal Reserve Note is unconstitutional. It was never supposed to be issued. It was issued in 1913. And fortunately, we have a very good way to transition smoothly without disrupting the capital markets. What we're going to do is we're going to replace those Federal Reserve notes with the dollars that were printed by Ronald Reagan. He did that following a study by a group called the Grace Commission. That Grace Commission found out that the income taxes that were paid all left the country, 100% of them, they went to the United Kingdom, and then most of them went to the Vatican. And a lot of people were wondering how that can happen. That's because when King James in the United Kingdom financed his wars in 1213, he signed away the right of his kingdom to their money, and the United States actually never became independent from the United Kingdom after the Revolutionary War. Instead, what happened was our Revolutionary War debts came due, and when they came due, that's when there was a second secret constitution in 1871. And what our founding fathers did was they put a special provision in the United States Constitution called Article 5, which says that when 2/3 of the state legislatures request an amendment of the Constitution, there's supposed to be a constitutional convention. Well, we hit that trigger many, many years ago, probably in 1929, and the U.S. Congress has refused to call the Constitutional Convention. Now, that is a very serious matter. We're now sitting in something called an interregnum. That's when the U.S. Congress is refusing to do what it's required to do under the Constitution. And being a lawyer, I've been quite surprised by the role of the legal profession in acting as if there's nothing wrong, when in matter of fact, there's a lot wrong. And one of the things that's also wrong is the fact that the network of global corporate control has bought up all of the media, the mainstream media, our newspapers, our films. They've also done a lot to our universities, and so many people don't really know what's going on. Fortunately, a lot of people have started doing the research that they need to do, and they know that when they go on the internet, they have to compare and contrast, because a lot of the alternative media is also owned by this network of global corporate control. It's very easy for those people to gain control. They simply print money without having to pay for it, and they buy up whatever it is that they'd like to buy up, including the media. So now that a lot of us know about this, we turn off the news, or we watch it just to see what that group is trying to hoodwink us with. So having the feedback from anybody, and I'd like to show my email address. If you have a question, please email me. I'll do what I can to respond. And fortunately, one of the things that's happened in this period of time is that a lot of people have started working together. It's like we're kicking the soccer ball down the field, and we're running circles around that network of global corporate control. We knew that we would be able to do that because of a very powerful model. It's called a power transition model that came to the World Bank in 2003. It was developed for the Department of Defense by Jacek Kugler. It's very, very accurate, and it has been predicting that we would have coalitions to take back our world and our legality from this network of global corporate control. And this we're doing, a lot of people wonder how we're doing this. We're doing this by coalitions. You see the coalitions, they're the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Germany is joining the BRICS, and actually so is the United States, minus the Federal Reserve. And people wonder how can this come about? This is because of the way our founding fathers set up the United States. Unfortunately, many of the governors have been co-opted by this network. There's a group called Metro 1313. Those are institutions that are trying to keep the governors and states from their rightful role. So actually, 10 states have erased their boundaries under their constitutions. But there are a number of states that are actually acting like states. One of them is Texas. And just recently, Texas has started its own depository for gold. And gold has a very important role to play. That's because through time immemorial, gold and silver, the precious metals, have served as currency. And so that's what we need to do. We need to take back our currency and stop paying interest to the network of global corporate control. They're not entitled to it. And as a lawyer, I have found out, because of this, there's something called the Global Debt Facility, which contains the world's monetary gold reserves. During this video, I'm going to be answering 3 questions. Who owns the monetary gold reserves of the world? Who is working on the Coalition for the Rule of Law in the United States? And where are we in the global currency reset? In particular, we need to look to see what's happening with Greece. I've been criticized for being a little bit too academic and losing people in all of the different legal and economic details. One of the people on Twitter sent me an email. I wasn't even sure what it meant. It was TLDR. That means too long, didn't read. So I retweeted to him a picture by a group called Global Street Art. I'd like you to look at that because it's really, it says it all. What you see is a Monopoly board, and then you see some people who are crouched underneath the board. They've got the world on their backs. They're being exploited by the bankers, and then behind the bankers, you see the symbol of the pyramid, because this banking cartel stretches way, way back. It goes back to the days of Babylonia, and probably even further back. We have had this network of global corporate control with us for a very long time. And people have actually learned how to combat that group. We've inherited some very important tools. And one of the tools that we've inherited is the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, which were set up so that when the world's gold, which was put in a trust fund by Ferdinand Marcos, when the world's gold came out after 50 years, there would be an institution that could decide what to do with the world's gold. And so that's what we are doing. And the groups that are trying to prevent us from using these tools are having a very hard time, actually. What they've done is they've tried to, first of all, they tried to deny the fact that the world's gold was in the global debt facility or that the Bretton Woods institutions had anything to do with it. They've been saying that something called the Committee of 300 had the right to the world's gold. What is the Committee of 300? That's primarily the royalty. It's also some honchos from the capital markets. But they don't have a right to the world's gold. The way the trust was set up, it's to be determined by the ministers of finance and development at the World Bank and the IMF. First of all, they're to authenticate the signature of the person who's authorized to sign. And what you see in the recent days is you see various groups that are claiming that they're the authorized signatory. Now, nobody can appoint themselves. Nobody can anoint themselves. It's going to be decided by the World Bank and the IMF Board of Governors. And these institutions have been hijacked by the network of global corporate control. So the president of the World Bank and the managing director of the International Monetary Fund are acting as if it's their right to run those organizations and ignore the Board of Governors. And I gave a legal opinion which corrected that. There's been something called a gentleman's agreement which ended in 2010. The gentleman's agreement said that the United States could simply name who it wanted as the president of the World Bank. That's Jim Kim. But when Jim Kim became the president of the World Bank, it was actually voted by the Board of Governors, because after 66 years, the gentleman's agreement ended. There was also an agreement that the European Union would simply name who was going to be the managing director of the IMF. And that's Christine Lagarde. She came into that office after what happened to Dominique Strauss-Kahn. The reason that Dominique Strauss-Kahn was booted out with this scandal, that was because he was asking for the United States to pay up the gold that it was supposed to contribute to the IMF. He was starting to raise questions about the role of the World Bank and the IMF with respect to the world's gold. That's why they had to get rid of him. Well, unfortunately for the network of global corporate control, we now, many of us, understand that Christine Lagarde and Jim Kim they're not in charge. It's the ministers of finance and development who are in charge. Although these officials are, they're not really wowing us with their courage, because it's been a very difficult time for those people who did have the courage to stand up and do what was right for their peoples. We've seen what happened to Muammar Gaddafi. He paid a very high price for trying to do what was right. John F. Kennedy, he was another who tried to do what was right. Ronald Reagan was shot by Hinckley when he issued dollars from the U.S. Treasury Department, and we saw what happened with Abraham Lincoln. So there's good reason to worry if you're a leader, what might happen to you if you do what's right for your people, as opposed to what the network of global corporate control is telling you you're supposed to do. So what happened in this past month of June has been really very interesting, because we've had, first of all, we've had the group of 7 meeting, and there was a very interesting editorial which said that the G7 should just be abolished. That's the 7 largest economies. And what happened after that was we had the Bilderberg group meeting. That was on the 11th of June. And I wrote a letter to the Bilderberg Steering Committee. The Bank for International Settlements and its member central banks are in receivership in the global debt facility. That means that they owe us more money than we owe them. That's because there are bonds that were issued back in the 1930s when the gold was collected from the elites. And those bonds have been accruing and compounding interest, and they're now worth more than $2 quadrillion. So when Greece is told that they owe the money back to the banks, it's actually the banks that owe the money to Greece and the rest of us. And I spoke with the representative of Greece on the board of the World Bank, because we're not going to have to worry about austerity programs when actually the world's wealth is owned by the world's people and not the world's banks. Now, we're in a tug of war, because in the meantime, these banks are in control of the media, and they're trying to frighten us with all kinds of stories about how Greece is about to default, and we need to do a lot of careful analysis to see what the reality actually is. The reality is that it's us that own the world's gold reserves. And we need to use these reserves in a monetary reset of our currencies before the paper currencies crash. At the moment, the dollar is no longer the international reserve currency. That means that countries are not using dollars to finance international trade. The BRICS countries are using their own currencies and offsetting. They're also doing something to replace the interbank payments, which is called the SWIFT system. So that means that there's a glut of Federal Reserve notes, and we need to replace these before they crash, because they will crash. And if we haven't replaced them, that's like a unilateral surrender. What I did last year was I went to Japan, because you remember that it's the United States military that is working for the defense of Japan. And there's a committee called the Joint U.S.-Japan Committee under the Status of Forces Agreement. And that group is out of the chain of command in the U.S. military. That means that the military is able to actually serve the interest of the United States rather than the interest of the network of global corporate control. I have 4 documents which I wanted to show you, which show what's been going on now as proof of the fact that the world's gold is in the global debt facility and not owned by the Federal Reserve. One of these proofs is a notice that the International Court of Justice issued, and then they took it down. What the ICJ did, was they said that Ferdinand Marcos's documents were no longer valid. So I sent an email to the ICJ and followed it up with a letter saying that they had no jurisdiction over the matter, and that the Board of Governors of the World Bank was not going to allow the International Court of Justice to steal their monetary gold reserves, which belong to humanity. Now, the CIA also issued a notice which they cross-referenced the decision of the ICJ. The ICJ just took its notice down from the internet. They had to, after the Board of Governors said that it was null and void. So the CIA, they tried to take the document that someone had sent me out of my email. So I just asked the person who sent it to me to resend it, which they did. And but now that we have that document, we can look at it and we can ask ourselves, who is the CIA representing? Are they representing the security interest of the United States? If they were, why would they take away the gold reserves that belong to the United States? It's pretty clear the CIA does not represent the security interest of the United States. They represent the network of global corporate control. There was another document which came into my hands. That's a letter of China to John Kerry, and it's really very interesting, that letter. What it says is that they're referring to Ferdinand Marcos, and they're also referring to some of the conflict in the East Asia Sea. What they say is that we have all the right to build all military infrastructure in the South Sea area using funds approved by late President Ferdinand Marcos. So it's pretty clear we do have a global debt facility. That letter is dated May 22nd, 2015. So it's staring us in the face. We are entitled to the world's gold, and we have a decision mechanism to peacefully decide what to do with that gold. What we're going to do, as I said, is we're going to replace the paper currencies. When all of this was going on, you can imagine the network of global corporate control was scrambling. What could they do? So they did what they thought they could. They said that they were going to be holding a conference, and they issued on Facebook an invitation. It was a letter to the International Monetary Fund by the son of Ferdinand Marcos. Now, I simply issued a tweet saying that the signature authority over the world's gold is authenticated by the Bretton Woods institutions, and this conference was not something that was in the interest of the Bretton Woods institutions or the people that the Bretton Woods institutions are supposed to be representing. So I told the Board of Governors that they should just stay home. Now, this conference is supposed to happen in August, so we're going to be seeing in short order whether the Bretton Woods institutions are going to fulfill their function as designed, which is to say that they're going to place the world's gold to the benefit of the world's people. And I frankly believe that that's exactly what's going to happen, because there's no reason why we should, after the gold was sequestered for 50 years, there is no reason why we should just turn it over back to the network of global corporate control. Of course we shouldn't, and we won't. Now, there's a quote that I wanted to leave you with. On my Facebook, a friend, Stephen Morrow, said, "The leaders of good of the United States of America have become devoid of any shred of decency in regards to the survival of humanity, and their reach is now infecting those leaders of similar countries like my once great and fair Australia. So sad to be sitting here on the sidelines and seeing it all unfold with no way of stopping it." So I said to Stephen, no way of stopping it? No way. It's the network of global corporate control left out in their undies who has no way of stopping us. And that's where things are now. They do have no way of stopping us. I also wanted to leave you with another thought, and that is it's very important what's going to actually happen with the United States military. That's one of the indicators that you have to be looking at. Is the U.S. military going to do what's necessary to defend the United States, or are they simply a tool of the network of global corporate control? General Douglas MacArthur addressed the Massachusetts State Legislature in Boston in 1951. This is what he said: "I find in existence a new and heretofore unknown and dangerous concept that the members of our armed forces owe primary allegiance and loyalty to those who temporarily exercise the authority of the executive branch of government, rather than the country and its constitution, which they are sworn to defend. No proposition could be more dangerous. None could cast a greater doubt upon the integrity of the armed services, for its application would at once convert them from their traditional and constitutional role as the instrument for the defense of the Republic into something partaking of the nature of a Praetorian Guard, owing its allegiance to the political master of the hour." So we're going to see where the U.S. military comes out. Are they there to serve the network of global corporate control, or are they there to serve the Republic? I want to thank you for listening to another segment of the network of global corporate control. We've discussed how people are uncovering the corruption at the center of the world's currencies. They're not going to pay interest on country debt. to the world's central banks, when in truth, it's these banks that have been secretly hiding the people's gold. Next week's segment will feature how the lawyers, accountants, and journalists have perpetuated this scam. And I'm going to be very grateful, and I am grateful to the people here at DCTV who have been supporting me. It's the banks that have been secretly hiding the people's gold, and we're not going to let that continue. I did. I think it went smoother than